Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's the
horrible.
thing. Somebody once told me that Tennessee had like some of the best roads in the nation, and I think that might have been a myth.
That might have been just to lure you.
Yeah, I think that. Did you say that? Yeah, that's.
Because he's never been anywhere.
Yeah. Hey.
Okay.
Well, hey, I think we should start recording.
Let's do it.
For the MxU Podcast.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for being here. We're joined today by Jeremy Lommori and Jeremy Bagwell, a.k.a. the Jeremys. That's what we call them around here at MxU.
All right.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm glad we're talked about. When
Yeah,
we're not here.
Yeah.
We talk about you a lot when you're not here.
But sometimes I will say accidentally we say the Lommoris.
Oh, that works.
And then sometimes it's like Bagwell and Lommori, and then sometimes it's the Bagwells, and then it's the Jeremys.
Okay.
So, anyways,
So for
that's
those of you
cute.
who've listened
guys.
to the MxU video podcast over the last couple of years, you know that Jeremy and Rusty were hosting that podcast, and Jeremy Lommori was a frequent guest. Were you there more than once?
A couple times. I think a couple times, yeah.
Super smart guy, super knowledgeable, but also has a heart for the church, which is great. So for those of you who don't know, why don't we give you a chance to give everybody just a little bit of background on who you are, what you do, kind of your role now.
Sure. Yeah, I came out of the church. I mean, I started in high school doing production at my local church and, you know, doing audio and video. Did actually quite a bit of like video editing stuff. I don't claim that now in any way, shape, or form.
Wow, I did not know that.
Bagwell
about
didn't
you.
even know that.
I
I know. And then kind of moved more into the broadcast space. Worked for a broadcast manufacturer for 5 years, and have worked at a couple different churches. So I did 4 years at North Point in Georgia, and then now the last 4 years I've been at Fox in Phoenix, but doing network broadcast. And having a lot of fun.
Great. So kids at home, if you ever want to work on the Super Bowl someday, go serve in your local church.
That's
right.
I have said over and over again, like, it is the best training place for anything production related, video, audio, lighting, live event, broadcast, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
There is no equivalent in the industry that you can get your hands on the quality of gear and get the amount of reps. It's just time, behind a console. It's time sitting behind a switcher. Where can you do that?
Yeah.
Anywhere.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And so it's such an awesome opportunity if it's something you're interested in. Even to not work in the church long term, it's a great place.
No better place to get experience with gear because no other place has gear like the church does.
No.
It's cool.
and for all the video people, let Jeremy be an example. It's okay to mix audio every now and then.
It is.
Yeah.
I don't know many video people who
We all start somewhere.
starts. Audio is the gateway drug.
Yeah, I mean, I mixed on an M7.
There
It
you
was
go.
awesome.
Yeah.
There you go.
M7.
Yeah.
Great console.
I mixed last weekend. So
Yeah.
at my church.
You guys mix on a 225 at your church?
We have a 225 now. Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
So most time when you're volunteering at your church, are you doing audio or are you kind of split between video and audio?
I will happily fill in kind of wherever they have a need. They have a full-time audio guy. They have a full-time video guy.
Okay.
So I often will kind of slot in if one of them is out. That was the audio guy was on vacation that weekend. So that's try to help him out and do that. So it's a mix.
Don't let him fool you. You should see his Easter rate. He played keys for Easter.
No way.
Really?
My personal service, I prefer to do music. That's
incredible.
Okay. I didn't know that.
You got to go to
We're learning.
Instagram. His
As
Easter
something
rig
you
was,
might know as production people, sometimes it's hard to be in a worship service and not be distracted by everything that's happening in production, right?
Totally.
So I have found when I do music, that's the time that I can disconnect. I put my
Focus
ears in.
on that,
I could care less what's happening in production.
That's awesome.
It's great.
Dude, that's amazing. This
Yeah.
is kind of a loaded question, but do you find that your being a musician and understanding some of audio, do you find that has made you more successful in your role in live video?
To some extent in live video, I think it helps a lot as an audio engineer.
Yeah.
To have an understanding
certainly.
of music.
Yeah.
In live video, music directing in particular, I could see it being helpful that you can kind of hear where a song's going, what's happening kind of with the band more kind of intuitively than not, but it's certainly not a prerequisite, in any way. But it probably helps a little.
That's cool, man.
That's cool. Jeremy,
Very
what's
cool.
new with you?
What's new? I don't know if there's a whole lot of new. I'm trying to be better at golf. That's what's
Yeah, you got new golf
Oh wait,
clubs.
that's not even new. That's
Yeah, I was
just
gonna
normal.
say that's just
not normal.
That's normal
Yeah.
Monday stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, but just visiting a lot of customers throughout the country, seeing a lot of churches, and it's been great having like real conversations, seeing real facilities, seeing how churches function, and all that.
Good.
So yeah,
Trade show season.
trade show season, which we just finished up. Who knows when this is going to air, but we finished up NAB and then FILO. FILO was great.
Yeah.
Be able to see everybody, and I love what we get to do at these type of things because it becomes like Carbonite help desk or like Genius Bar, which is great. Like some people feel like ashamed for like, hey, I already own a Carbonite, but I got this one question. I'm like, no, that's what we're here for. Like,
Yeah.
I want to help you be better with the gear you have. It's not just about selling new gear to you.
Yeah.
So it's fun to be able to say, okay, let me show you how to fix this or that, or improve your workflow and your switcher or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's always
great.
fun.
Yeah, we were at FILO as well, and it was just a couple weeks ago, but I thought it was great. I mean, it felt great.
Yep.
Todd and his team did an awesome job.
Yep.
Like, I was encouraged.
It's a real good, like, some of coming from my past experience working at a couple large churches, I encourage large churches to go to events. And I think sometimes it's a struggle if there's a large church production team out there, particularly staff team. I was like, why would I go to some of those? Because there's a lot of smaller churches that come to these FILO style events. And I just think it's a great networking opportunity. One, it's an opportunity for, if you're at a mega church, you really should be giving back. And it's an awesome way for you to go have conversations, meet new people, and help other churches be better just by the conversations are you going to learn something new? Maybe the content doesn't necessarily fit what you're looking for, but it's a great way to give back and network and meet people. And I always say, like, hey, go encourage people, because a lot of churches need encouragement.
Yeah.
And I think mega churches have a responsibility. If we worked on staff, we have a responsibility to help the global church, be better, but also feel inspired and say, hey, you're in the grind, man. If you're a small church and you're trying to be scrappy and do production, like, you need more encouragement than anybody else, in my opinion. So those events are really good for that.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's killer. Well, so we do this section on the podcast called Mix Review with Jeff. We pulled a clip for today, but I thought it'd be cool because you guys are here. You happen to know a thing or two about video, so you can provide some feedback as well. But I've got a clip we're going to play from Heart and Soul Church. I believe they're actually here in Knoxville. We didn't ask them to play this, so sorry guys if you're listening. But I believe they're set up and tear down in a school, and I can't tell you too much. I don't have much context beyond that, but we thought we'd play it, give some mix notes, maybe some notes on the video, and whatever thoughts might come up as well. So let's play that, guys. Man, it's cool. What did you like? What areas of improvement did you see?
Well, you said it's, as far as you know, it's a setup tear down every week.
They are, right, guys? They're set up and tear down?
Yeah. So, first of all, I mean, to set up that LED wall every week,
Yeah, I saw the
And-
genies on stage. And they were doing the whole thing.
It's pretty impressive. I think audio wise, Drums feel great. Like it's a really good kind of full, well-rounded mix of the drums. The fact that it's just, at least for that week, it's just drums, bass, and keys.
Yeah.
Like there's no electrics on stage.
Oh, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah. So
acoustic guitar.
obviously somebody listens to the mix and they think, well, that's really piano heavy. Yeah, it is, because it's the piano.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
there's nothing else on stage.
Yeah.
So piano player's doing a great job.
Yeah.
I could maybe, obviously I can't hear what the acoustic sounds like, but I could probably use a little more acoustic just to make it feel like he's actually playing, because he is playing, right?
Yeah.
You see it visually, so I want to hear more of it from a mix perspective. And this is a situation where I feel like if they have the ability to tune the vocals, they probably should. What feels like it's probably just fine in the room is less forgiving online.
Yeah. Because he's a good singer.
He's a good singer,
Yeah.
but they're jumping around. It's an exciting song.
Yeah.
They're pushing a little bit, maybe adrenaline, so the pitch is going a little sharp. It's like if you could apply some tuning, even if it's only to the vocals that are going on the stream, it would help you out a little bit. In the same vein, maybe a little more effects on the vocals.
Yeah.
Reverb covers a multitude of sins, and so especially because the perception from the computer speakers or the AirPods or whatever is going to be that those vocals are pretty dry.
Yeah.
You may have the advantage if they're in a gymatorium or whatever, there may be a really reverberant room that is making them feel like they have a lot of reverb.
Yeah.
But what's translating to the mix online is a little less than that. So,
that makes sense.
It makes any flaw in the mix become so much more exposed online when it's not washed in reverb, or the energy in the room. If people are singing, like if I'm singing along in the room, I'm not going to notice the vocal so much because I hear the sound of my voice in my own head. So when all I hear is the isolated vocal from those mics, any flaws in there are going to be more pronounced.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive though. I didn't really hear much tracks. Did you hear? I didn't.
That's my point. I think it's just piano, bass, acoustic.
I mean, again, sounded pretty full for what it was.
Yeah,
what are your guys' thoughts?
The drums feel great.
Well, I'll caveat first by saying I'm generally an engineering person and make the joke that I don't really care what the content is. It doesn't mean I don't have opinions on what the content should be.
But the signal was solid and it didn't drop.
As far as I know, the video stayed on the whole time. And that's about where my life usually ends.
Yeah.
There's too many people with opinions about how cameras should cut that leave them to it. Like Bagwell. But no, I agree. For a setup and teardown, that's a lot of infrastructure to put in every week and make sure is working and dialed in and doing it week after week. That's a ton of work. So they're doing a great job on the whole. A couple things I saw that kind of jumped out at first was just checking things like eye line with cameras. So trying to make sure, especially on your long cameras, that you're pretty much even with the eye line of the person that's on stage. So you're not shooting down at that angle. You feel it a little more when you cut to those handhelds, and they're usually under the eye line and have a little bit more of kind of that up hero shot style.
Yeah.
When you're already above, now you have this like really big back and forth that you're jumping between, kind of looking down and then looking up, and then looking down and then looking up. It makes it a lot more evident.
It can be confusing to the viewer.
Yeah,
or
it takes you out of place.
Yeah.
Right, because if you were to think you're trying to, especially for a broadcast cut, a non-IMAG cut, you're trying to provide an experience of what is like to stand in the room. That's not what you're experiencing standing in the room. You're always seeing it from one kind of perspective in the room.
That's good.
Yeah.
And so when you're jumping, especially on the vertical plane, you just notice it a lot. And so that's a relatively, especially if they're set up and teardown, that could be a relatively easy fix depending on what kind of platforms and tripods and things they're using.
Yeah.
It also there could be some limiting factor that we can't see that's not an option. And that's fine too. A lot of these things, and we're going to talk about it a lot here, I think it's compromise. And, you have to balance all these things to be able to execute. And maybe that's the circumstance, but, one thing to potentially look at.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting decisions. I have a hard time critiquing it because it is set up and tear down. Like at the end of the day, it's like, man, set up and tear down is enough. I am proud of them for trying to do cameras. I think there was 4 or 5 cameras, based on what small clip I saw. I think there's maybe 2 handheld cameras and then 2 cameras probably in the back of the room. 2 cameras in the back of the room could be PTZs or, well, we'll know. Somebody will comment and tell us the setup. But that's my guess.
Yeah.
We'll see if we're right.
Could be.
But what I noticed is there's some two really big things. No, sorry, 3 things. One, lighting. So being set up and tear down, understand lighting is going to be a beast because
that might be the thing that is always kind of last in line for a setup teardown
Either
environment.
You're putting them up every week or they're kind of set up there and you don't have access to them during the week and you can't change it. So, but there's a lot of lighting things. I think the music had a lot of energy and we didn't see the energy. We couldn't physically see some of the other vocalists were dim. And so that energy didn't translate on this side of the camera when we looked at it. So it's like, you always got to be asking yourself, okay, like what am I hearing from an energy standpoint? And like, how can we display that energy? Right. Yeah. So sometimes there's not energy, but that song, obviously there was a lot of energy. Those side handheld cameras shots were attempting to capture some of that energy. But the wide shots in the back of the room, you could see some of the, darkness of or dimness of some of the other background vocals. So being able to get your key light right, I think get white light on people before you get color. Like color doesn't matter at the end of the day. You got this big LED wall and you got a few little lighting fixtures in the back. That's fine. White light everybody so that then you can actually see the people and let them be the vibrancy of it instead of letting color. There was like a pink light that was like casting on the side of that. That just doesn't help anybody in that moment. So, and maybe they're fighting for something during the, in-person experience or something, but, so lighting, number 2 was there was some interesting camera shot choices of like, okay, wrong moments of choosing when to take what shots. So there was like there's this big like take you at your word, right? Where it like that goes into the big chorus. Like there's kind of like that drop out and then kick into the chorus. And then we stayed on a camera shot from before that through that whole moment. Well, that moment is a time to see the entire energy of the room and maybe kind of a wide push shot. So you cut to it like right before that big hit happens. And so you see everybody and it just captures that and you're pushing in and you're capturing that energy. So just some subtle changes and flowing with the music would have been really helpful in helping us like draw us in. Instead of us like kind of question like why do we need to see that? When would we need to see that? And then the other thing is just, I would say I want to see the facial expressions of all the folks. And let's be real intentional about capturing facial expressions. Wide shots are great, but wide shots are not everything. And so I like to tell people all the time is like, hey, in your span of like, let's say you have 15 or 20 minutes of music, your worship set, like what percentage of that is like tight shots? So let's say waist up. So waist to head, and what percentage of that are like wide shots of the room, and then make sure that you're kind of mixing that in. So I think we want.
So for you, like, what is that percentage?
I think it's like 70-30. Because
tighter rather than wider.
Yes, because wider is great when it's done in the right moments.
Yeah,
but if we're just wide shot during a time where wide shot allows us to breathe. It allows us to capture what's been in the room. It's like, okay, cool. It kind of resets us and gives us context. But then like, I want to see people involved. I want to see people like leading us. And so sometimes wide shots don't allow us to see personality and expression in the details. So yes, I would say probably 70-30. From a volume of shots doesn't necessarily mean the timing, right? So like I can go tight shot, tight shot, tight shot, tight shot, wide. So it's one wide shot that spans the time of what those 3 or 4 tight shots were. Yeah. You know, so I'm not saying 70-30 from a time standpoint. I'm saying how many
number of shots.
Okay.
That's great.
And if you look at their more wide center shot, which that camera very well may have a different use and it
Yeah.
just got cut into the
Yeah.
music cut,
Yeah.
which is an important note that you don't
Yeah.
always have to do that. Just
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you have that camera doesn't mean you have to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they're using it as a center capture for a sermon segment or
Yeah.
whatever's coming next. But like that camera, if the intent of the wide shot is to give you that perspective of the room, you couldn't see any of the room necessarily. So I don't know that you're fully capturing that.
Yeah.
And, you might be cutting off some players. Like I think the keyboard player wasn't in the shot.
Yeah.
So just being a little bit more intentional where if you're going to use a wide shot, it's serving a purpose.
Yeah.
And it's not just one of the other cameras that gets punched
That's good.
on the switcher.
Yeah, I would say like my feedback would probably land on the realm of like, let's define the experience on the other side of the camera. Let's define this YouTube experience as just as much as we define, and we talked about this at our pop-up events, but like, let's define the experience just as much as we define what the in-room experience is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's define what the experience of a viewer watching on YouTube is.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's make some very intentional things to make that work. They have all the right tools, 4 cameras, 5 cameras, all the right tools.
Yep.
Just some slight changes in intentionality and maybe some training.
Yep.
Maybe just learning like what good shots or bad shots are, understanding the pace and rhythm and energy of the songs and stuff. And you like next week could be drastically better. Or it could be fine. Like they could be very fine with what that is because that's defined of like, hey, we're just going to let people just kind of do their thing. We're just going to take cameras as it is. And if that's the way you define the YouTube experience for your church, great.
Yep.
But if you want it to be something more than that, or if you were trying to define it like a distraction free or and all these other things, then
That's good.
make some improvements.
Yeah, well, I think for this particular church, just what you've said in terms of just helpful tips, I think if it's a volunteer director, volunteer camera ops, just applying some of those things could make even the way they're thinking about it better.
Yeah.
So I think like none of our comments here are to throw anybody under the bus or to be hypercritical. It's like, but I know that they would want to be better.
Yeah.
We all want to get better all the time. So I think it's super helpful. I mean, I really like it doesn't come across to me as overly critical. They're doing a whole lot with what they've got.
Yeah.
They're doing a great job. So it's like, okay, how can we take that and refine it even more, distill it down to what we really want to communicate as effectively as we can and make it better. I think it's great.
The one thing that you can be drastically like are instantly better next Sunday is like listen to that song, which could be 3.5 to 5 minutes long prior, and to find 3 shots. Like what are the 3 why shots? Like, what are those moments? And know, like, have them memorized. Like, okay, these are the 3 moments in that 3.5 minute time where I'm going to go to this shot because that's really important.
Yeah.
And so just doing a little bit, and that's just like three shots better.
Yeah.
Would make a big improvement. So just defining those things.
That's great.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, I think for the side shot too, like the handheld shot that was from the side of the stage, I would say for that operator, like have a subject, have a shot in mind where it's not just, okay, there's a guy way over there doing something and he's maybe jumping around. It's like, what is the shot?
Yeah.
So that every time I cut to that camera, as the director, I know that every time I go to camera 4, he's going to have something worth taking.
Yeah.
That it's not just a, random thing that I'm just punching through.
Yeah.
But the camera ops, especially handhelds, are intentional about, framing a subject.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my church, the video director's done a great job. Instead of having a lot of handheld wireless cameras, they've put a lot of relatively inexpensive sliders on stage. So you still have a little bit of that motion that you get from the handheld that you want to keep the energy up, but the shots are pre-framed, right? So you have one on the drummer. You always know, it doesn't matter when I cut to that. The movement's there, and I always know that shot's okay. Now, I need to cut to it when the drummer's doing something and pay attention to the song, of course. But that also might be something that can help instead of having a lot of handhelds, and that might be logistically challenging if they're setting up and tearing down. But having something that's more fixed, maybe with a little movement that this shot's going to be good. Yeah, and there's going to be a subject in the right spot at the right time. I can just take it.
It's just really, it's more reliable.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm a little over handhelds, to be honest. Like, I just think like put a tripod up and like get some like pushes and pulls, get some tight ones, get some wide. Like if you're going to have 4 or 5 cameras, like maybe one handheld that can float around. It's just not, a lot of times it's not a flattering shot either. in a lot of ways. So, like
Drummers
maybe-
in shorts.
Yeah, it's just, and it's more complicated from a gear standpoint. Like obviously in a setup, tear down is a little way more complicated. But yeah, I think having.
But it's not church production if we don't have the handheld knelt in front of the guitar player
Lord,
with the shot
stop.
up the neck.
Oh, man.
The
Yeah,
headless
I can't
player.
do that.
Yeah.
Headless player.
Headless
Headless
players.
player.
If we could just stop those,
No headless players.
man, we would.
Yeah.
And for all you operators who are like hanging around on the front lines of the stage, looking like a Navy SEAL, getting in front of everybody, just go ahead and stop. Just go to the back line.
It depends. It kind of depends, but yes.
Just put in a Furio.
Yeah,
And
for
you're
sure.
It's always when they're when they're in front of the BGV.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
see
you're
the
like,
backside
yeah,
of
I
a
know.
camera op, and you're like,
Yeah.
"What's happening
Yeah.
right now on stage?"
Something we've started doing at my church is just getting the handheld operators away from the front of the stage, like inside, like in an aisle,
Yeah.
and things where it's like, hey, let's capture the back of head. I always say, no one wants to see their face on YouTube if you're an attendee, right? You don't want to see, but a back of a head or some heads with hand raised and the band playing, and like let them be a version of a wide shot.
Yeah.
That's not right up there.
As if they're an
people feel-
audience member.
Yeah.
Right.
Helps
Yeah.
people
It's
feel
a
like they're
great
part of it.
wide shot, even
Yeah.
if it's not that wide.
Right. It's a little bit more complicated to get, so you definitely got to work at it. And it's really hard to do during run through. It's an empty room. Like you never know where the right shot is. But
Yeah.
Well, and these folks might not even have a run through.
right.
They
Correct.
just finished loading 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And they've got to go.
Let's
Yeah,
go.
they're showing up at
go,
4
Tyler.
a.m. pushing cases.
Yeah, right.
Eating McDonald's.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Well, bottom line, great job.
Yes.
yeah, heart
Yeah,
and
I mean,
soul.
it was-
Way to go, guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Come by sometime. We want to meet you. Anyways, tomorrow, Tuesday, we've got a course on MxU releasing. Todd Elliott talking about leading as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Which sometimes can be a bit of a foreign thought. Let's talk about that a little bit. And we'll play a clip for tomorrow. But Jeremy, you're a volunteer at your church.
I am. Yep.
So, and I know, Jeff, you volunteered in the church. Jeremy, sometimes you show up to church, right?
I volunteer. I would consider myself a volunteer. Yes.
So this idea, leading as a volunteer, let's check out what Todd has to say, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think trust, for me, number one, most important thing in what we do. If I don't trust you to get a job done, or you don't trust me to do the thing that I'm responsible for, it's going to cause all kinds of problems down the road.
Yeah.
When there are problems, and if I don't trust you, I'm going to assume the worst.
Right.
And it goes from there. And so for me, it's important to build trust with the people that you're with. And the number one way for me is to be trustworthy, to be somebody that can be trusted.
Yeah.
It starts there. This is the thing I have control over.
Right.
I don't have control over your trustworthiness, but I have control over mine. And so if I want to be in an environment where I can lead the people around me, lead the people below me, lead the people above me, I need to be a trustworthy person.
Well, obviously we love Todd
Yeah.
and his heart for building teams that are serving from a posture that's spiritually healthy, emotionally healthy, and healthy for everybody around the rest of the team. But I think the point that, no matter what role we serve as a volunteer, we're still leading, right? And so, the idea of leading with intentionality and leading toward a mindset that says, I'm going to continually improve. I want to get better every week. So, for him, excellence is, let's be better this week than we were last week. And I think that's a great sort of metric for kind of how we're tracking our own personal growth and improvement, but then how we're kind of operating as a team as well.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. You can, again, we talk about this, and I don't think we talk about it enough, though. I feel like we're beating a dead horse. But all in all, if you're a volunteer, you're not there just to be a warm body. Like, you can lead, right? And I think that's, Jeremy, you often talk about in your church, whether you're helping, and obviously you have experience outside of the church and what you do vocationally at Fox, but still to be able to not take on the idea of I'm just a volunteer, right? I can lead still. I still have something to contribute beyond just sitting here and pressing spacebar for the next lyric slide to show up.
Sometimes it's the opposite though, too. Like as a industry professional, as a manufacturer rep, as a touring professional, to resist the temptation to walk in and feel like I know everything, so I'm just going to tell everybody what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I still have to submit to the leadership of the production team, to the staff person who has brought me in to do whatever.
Yeah.
You know, there's a great sort of challenge in humility of maybe you are the smartest person in the room, but it's not your job today to be the video engineer.
Yeah.
So talk about that for a minute. Like how do you sort of serve from a place where sometimes you're going, yeah, I could really make this better, but that's not my job today.
Right. Yeah, I think it's always a balance of, well, it's hugely relational.
Yeah.
You know, and making sure you have a really good rapport with the staff, with the people that have been put in charge. And but even beyond that, it's just taking that posture of like, hey, how do you need help? Not how do I want to help you? It's how do you need help in this moment? What's the thing that's really, you know, maybe causing a pain point? And are you looking for a suggestion? Because I could probably offer one. That's probably
or 10.
true. Yeah, or 10. Or are you not looking for a suggestion? You're looking for, you know, someone to operate and be within the confines of how you do things. That's fine too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. I had at my church, right when we started going a few years ago, they had asked me to mix Easter. They were in between audio guys. And we were on an M32 at the time, and I was like, okay, this console, like I had not mixed on an M32. It's an experience.
Yeah.
And so I started kind of digging into like, how does this thing even work, you know? And I had said to the production director at the time, who didn't really know me at all, didn't know my background, and like somebody had said, hey, he knows how to mix. Can he mix? And I said, sure. And I said, hey, I kind of looked at the console, everything's good. I'm just gonna kind of tweak the file. Like I'm operating front of house, so I have a flow. And he's like, absolutely not. You are not. Don't touch the routing. Nobody knows how it works. If you touch it, you're gonna break it. And I was like, oh, okay, and that's fine. I mean, he was very concerned. You know, we got through that service, and he was like, I probably should have had you change the file. I said, well, that's okay. That's no big deal, you know. And but he didn't know, and his job is to make sure that the service is executed. So this random guy shows up and says, I want to blow up your file on your front of house console.
Right.
Yeah, he's not interested in that as an option. You know, which is totally fair, and he had every right to be concerned about what that could entail, what that could affect down the road for the whole service, you know, and my job as a volunteer was to say, no problem. I'm going to make it as good as I can while trying to figure out how this thing works and how this structure is all set up and be able to mix within, you know, the confines that we're in. And that's, I think as more industry professionals, that's something we might come up against a little bit more frequently.
Yeah, that's true.
But as just a general volunteer, you know, every role, you're not there as a warm body, right? You're not there. Every role matters. You wouldn't be asking a volunteer to come sit there if they weren't doing a job that was really critical.
Right.
You know, most production teams don't have the problem of too many people and they just want people sitting around, right?
Yeah,
Most are struggling to find enough people. So they're always kind of bare bones. This is what we need to execute a service. Yeah. And even if you're just, you know, hitting spacebar for lyrics, that's super critical. Even if we have a semi-volunteer position, you know, it's staffed like 1 out of 4 weekends, but volunteer position of somebody that runs clocks, like they click a ProPresenter next button that nobody even sees. Yeah. But that is, as far as I'm concerned, somebody that's on stage sometimes, the most critical position. If a lyric's a little late, that's fine. But if, you know, we don't have clocks, we don't know where we're going, that's a super critical role that they're fulfilling, even though nobody in the church sees it. Right. Yeah. And knowing that it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's like, it's super critical, and you can be a key component to what we're all doing as a group and executing you know, on a service.
That's good.
It's the, you know, you touched on this earlier, Jeff, you did too. It's like leading doesn't always mean expressing your opinion. It could just be showing up on time. Like just some practical takeaways. If you want to lead in the role of being a volunteer, make sure you're showing up on time. Maybe ask people how their day was before just getting right to the task that you needed to get done. And, you know, it's like leading is setting the temperature in the room. And so it might be that one of the biggest issues your team is facing right now is like nobody's showing up on time. So you could just lead and set that example before you express opinions on which video switcher they need to buy. You know, so anyways, I think it's great. We're super excited for that course to come out. It'll be available on MxU tomorrow, and we're pumped. But for the meat and potatoes of today, we've been talking a lot about, Jeremy, you were in Phoenix at our pop-up, and then we had just had a pop-up in DC We'll be going to Columbus here shortly. And we've been talking a lot about broadcast. And today could potentially turn into a mega episode. I can already feel it coming. So all that to say, let's dive in.
I think we need to define some terms.
Yes.
Because Jeremy, you do a great job in expressing this idea that broadcast in some people's mind is their live stream.
Mm-hmm.
But you would argue that anything that is being sent outside the room, outside the main auditorium,
Yep.
whether it's a hallway,
Yep.
a nursing mother's room, outside, the web, whatever, everything that we're sending out of the room is a broadcast.
Yep.
And so let's just clarify some of that, just from a video perspective and an engineering perspective. It's like there's some terms that we need to define.
Yeah.
So,
I would love to hear Jeremy's take on it, because he works for a large broadcast company who Jeremy gets to see a million video signals in and out of his building every day.
Yeah.
That are broadcast signals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you define broadcast?
Yeah, I mean, in this context, I would agree with that definition. That's anything outside the room. I think there is a little bit of a gray area when it comes to places inside your building that are outside of your main room, and that's only at the larger scale that you start having those determinations. So, like at our church, we have an IMAG program that's for in the room. And we have the equipment to support this. That's a key component of it too. But we have an IMAG program that's in the room, and then we have a broadcast program. That's what goes online. But it's not just what goes online. It's also other content. So they have a pre-roll to that broadcast content that's not shown in the room. And so now you have an extra layer of something that you need to produce outside of what's in the room and needs to go out. And a lot of churches do that. In the past, there's been a lot of live hosting where they do those segments are not happening in the room. So then the question is, if you're defining broadcast for hallways and other facilities inside the building, do they get that content?
Yeah.
Or do they get the room content? So we have another program called distribution program, which is the broadcast camera cut, but only the in-room content. So there's no additional content. That's why I say it gets a little complicated.
Yeah.
There's some levels there. In general, though, I would agree. Broadcast is what is leaving the facility. And at a smaller scale, I think there's even a need a lot of times for broadcast before there's a need for IMAG.
Yeah.
If you're in a room with 500 or 600 seats, you probably don't need IMAG. And in fact, you would probably benefit from prioritizing some sort of graphics on screens that people can clearly see, as opposed to reading a small lower third or something like that. And using your whatever IMAG, LED projectors, whatever that is, for that reinforcement as opposed to cameras, and use the camera infrastructures to actually have a decent, external product, whether that's hallways or streaming online or even just recording. You might just record it and play it, upload it to YouTube the next day, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to be true live, but doing that. So I'd say, I agree with you though. Broadcast is anything in that category. That's leaving the room. That's not IMAG in the space.
I think the way I said it at some of the pop-ups was we have to, again, go back to defining the experience, right? The in-room experience and then outside the room experience. And then we also start the conversation by talking about what is streaming and stuff. And so streaming is obviously a tool for whatever video signal you want to get there. Yeah. So it may be your IMAG cut, it may be your broadcast cut. Remember, so Jeremy really has 3 different experiences, right? He's got a hallway experience for people attending. He has an in-room experience, and he has a broadcast experience. And so, but the broadcast, the hallways is a hybrid between the two, but they've clearly defined it and you supported it around gear and personnel and stuff like that and training.
Right.
So that's really I just hear a lot of the time people say streaming as a term for broadcast, and it's not the same. And we need to fix that terminology so that we can better help define and have a kind of a next level conversation around all that.
Yeah. So streaming is a technology.
Yeah.
right? It's a distribution technology. So in the network broadcast world, it's called OTT, streaming over the top. Doesn't really matter. It's not terrestrial broadcast where you're sending a signal over air.
Terrestrial broad. See,
Yeah. It's not where you're sending a signal out of a radio tower that the FCC is giving you a license for in your area.
Yeah.
Right? That was real broadcast.
that's called
Yeah.
what?
There's a lot of churches doing that. For sure.
Terrestrial.
A lot
I'm
of
not even
churches
trying to
doing
say
that.
it.
broadcast from the ground.
So
Nobody's
streaming
doing
is
that.
extraterrestrial.
Yeah, correct. Yes, streaming is all extra.
Is that
Well,
what
if you do it
Joel
over
Osteen's
Starlink-
doing? Is
Yeah,
that what they're
maybe.
doing over there?
Yeah, maybe. So that's all kind of on top of all the other broadcast products that are
Yeah.
in a network broadcast environment. But streaming is just one of many options. There are quite a few large churches in the country that deliver content to local TV for playback.
Right.
Some of that's even true live. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of that anymore, but there
Used
used
to
to
be
be
a
a
lot.
lot
Yeah.
of true live. They would do a satellite uplink from their building to downlink to the local TV station. They'd have a chunk of programming on a Sunday morning.
Yep.
That's broadcast. I mean, that is fully broadcast. That's what like network TV does every day.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of gone to the wayside because streaming works so well now, but that's just because it's a technology. It's not anything more. The same principles would apply if you had another location that maybe is a video only location, even to the point of like no music, just video. Okay, now what cut are they going to get? Are they going to get an iMac? Are they going to get a broadcast cut? You're probably sending it to them, but you're likely not using streaming technologies to send it to them. You're likely using some other kind of point to point over the internet technologies, of which there's a couple out there. And so streaming is not a great term to cover all things, external video or even complete video systems.
Yeah.
We need to do a video about this just for the MxU platform because I think there's a lot of terminology that people. I mean, most churches, let's be real, pastors saying, "Hey, is Facebook Live ready?"
Right.
Yeah.
Is that that's all it is?
Or there's a lot of times like I'll have conversations in churches. They're like, "Hey, we struggle. Like, we stream to our student environment." I'm like, "You're streaming. You're not really." Walk me through that. Well, they're not really streaming, right? Because it's not actually getting encoded video.
Yeah,
it's just an output. It's a copper cable with a video signal down to, but they call it streaming, and it's like that's just not. I'm like, it's not the right. We're not using the right words. That help you be pro. Right?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. A lot of churches are going, "Well, I don't need to be pro. I don't need to why are you guys talking about this?" But we've got to recognize that like learning these terms and learning how all of these things work together is how we solve problems.
Yes, correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And we have a plethora of problems in the church and how services get deployed. Everyone wants to deploy their services to the World Wide Web now. Right? So if we're doing that, we probably need to know the components and methods in which that happens.
Yeah.
And so if you're saying I'm not interested in being pro, that's fine. Just stop streaming then.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference when you go to the market to try to find solutions.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you're going into the industry and asking manufacturers, "Hey, I need to stream from this to this," you're going to get the wrong product.
Right.
to solve
Or I
that
need help
problem.
with my stream for my student building, and it's
Right.
not a stream.
Yeah.
You just need a different cable.
Yeah, so that was
Correct.
it happens all the time. I'm like, well, okay, we're not. What rabbit trail do we need to go down?
Yeah.
Right. Like,
How do we
And-
troubleshoot? Yeah.
and you
you're
could
talking
be
about two different things.
just from a manufacturer standpoint, you could be sold the wrong thing because you're using the wrong terms.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's for a person that's novice, like that's a really important thing. Like a sales rep is going to be like, "Oh, you're streaming? Well, you need this encoder that we sell."
Yeah.
I'm like, and then you get it and install it, and it's like, "Oh, that didn't solve our problem."
Or it's complete overkill for
Right,
what we really
correct,
need to
right,
do.
right.
Yeah.
Or it's not enough for what we thought we needed to do.
Yeah. And we're in just a whole new digital age, like where all of these technologies are like changing really fast. I mean, the word streaming didn't exist 15 years ago, really 20 years
it was
ago.
very much in its infancy.
I mean,
Yeah. That's so it's interesting. We're kind of unpacking that this is a rather large discipline to add into what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so this comes up often where we'll be reviewing services here on the podcast, or folks will send in their recordings to MxU and say, "I need so much help." And we oftentimes are kind of scratching our heads going, why are you trying to do this way? Right? Or why have you asked the important questions before you've invested all this money towards doing the thing that you saw the church down the street do during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know you guys are incredibly passionate about that. I think that's a lot of what we want to talk about here today is like, if you're listening right now and you're streaming, hopefully you can walk away from this episode having maybe some clearer questions that you can go to your pastor with of what are you guys trying to execute as a team and as a church,
Mm-hmm.
and what problems are worth solving, and then what problems are worth recognizing, man, we shouldn't be doing this anymore because we can't solve those problems.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you decide?
And how do you decide? And who do you decide with?
Yeah.
Like a lot of questions there. That's why it could be a mega episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's being a sole or one of only a couple technical leaders in a non-technical organization,
Mm-hmm.
which is a church.
Yep.
You're put in an interesting position as a tech director in a lot of places to both try to enable the ministries that your church is setting out to do, but also to be a voice of wisdom when certain initiatives are maybe pushed that you are saying, hey, we certainly can do that, but it takes X amount of dollars or X amount of resources and staff to be able to execute something like that at the quality that you likely want it executed at. And, I've seen a lot of technical leaders really want to say yes, which is good because I think maybe naturally a lot of their postures would be to push back against change. And so that's a positive thing that they're trying really hard to like, yeah, I want to enable whatever you need. I want to figure out a way to do it. But sometimes that comes at a big cost, either in their workload or in reliability. Often when you're taking a problem that's a $50,000 problem and you're spending $5,000 on it, you're cutting corners somewhere. There's not a reason that, that equipment's that much less expensive just for you to be able to afford it. So it's going to affect your ability to actually execute on that thing. So saying yes sometimes is a bit of a double-edged sword, in being able to do that. And so walking through that is unique to every situation. So it's hard to like say anything really particular, but asking questions, and sometimes the question is why? Like, what are we gaining? What's the whole intent from this? Is it, we have 1,000 people in our church and, 15% of them on a weekend aren't here and they want to be able to watch. It's like, okay, that's not a ton of people for a huge amount of resources and effort. Or is it we have 1,000 people in our church and we think we can reach 5,000 online? Well, that's a different discussion then, right? And that's now you're in a different category. And we need to be having different discussions of what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But are you really going to reach that amount of people if the quality of the product is really rough and people turn it on for 10 seconds and go, I can't watch that. The problem is there's so much media that people are just overwhelmed with all the time, every day on every platform.
And so much that's really well done.
Most of it is really well done. Right.
Have you seen Jeremy's Instagram?
I know it is
popping off.
It's a lot of golf clubs.
Stellar.
And so
It's not much golf.
Got a new driver.
Actually, I lived that in my secret life.
And it's tough, but it's tough to be at that level. It's really hard to execute. Yeah. And I know there's a big push for like this more organic, authentic. Yeah, a lot of that stuff's really well produced. Yeah. It looks organic and authentic. There's a lot of production.
It did not just happen off the
It
cuff.
doesn't just happen, right? There's a lot that goes into those things to make it feel that way. And when you're, a person that's not in this world and you're a senior pastor of a church and you're like, that's great, we're going to put it up and people are going to watch and everything's going to be good. Somebody needs to help advise like, hey, there's actually a lot more to it than that. Yeah. And it's not that we can't get there, but we need to be properly resourced. We need to have the right team, partners, whether that's integrators, or other consultants to help with training and like these types of things. We really need to help have the support.
This is a big, I'm going to say a statement. Maybe we jump in on this or we just
cut it out.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. Let's be.
Yeah.
I just think the modern church, and I will say North American church, because there's more stylistic churches in North America, like the way we're talking about style of churches, particularly in the evangelical world. There's not any other industry. Think about like what we watch and what we consume. What else is a live experience, like a a really carefully crafted live experience being broadcast in a way that we're wanting to watch that. Maybe the Super Bowl, it's a live experience of the sporting team, so there's other reasons why we're watching that. We're not watching it just because of and there's social and some other things. But just think about it, like as you're listening to the podcast, name, okay, the content you watch on the other side of the screen, the content you consume. The church has like this crazy industry where it's like we're building this live experience for the people in the room, and we're broadcasting it, and it's like, and we're expecting people to want to. We're expecting this is me now being on the other side of being a staff member, where I'm like, why? Of course, people would at 9 a.m. turn the stream on and watch. Why wouldn't they? Now I'm like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, not from because I'm a bad person, just because it's like 9 a.m. I'm like, no, it doesn't fit the flow of how we consume, and it's not wrong. Like, I'm not in the wrong. It's not like unspiritual, right? It's just the wrong medium and platform. It's the wrong methodology, and methodology changes all the time. Theology doesn't, but methodology does. And so for 2,000 plus years.
Hey, you got eyes from Pastor Nate over there. He was like, this is nice. Nice. I like it.
For 2,000 years, people gathered in a home and they were taught, right? In that whole rabbi thing, and we could go down that whole thing. But anyway, they were taught because like the only medium and only methodology for teaching God's word was to gather it together. Yeah. And we kept that sacred, and that's a thing. But now that was the only way somebody could learn about God.
Yeah.
Guess what?
Where's the can of worms? We're opening it. We're going there.
But guess what? There's so many. This is because it goes back to the streaming thing. It's like there's so many incredible opportunities for people to hear the word of God and to experience through technology. It's like I just am questioning, like, does the 75-minute church experience need to be broadcasted on the web? I bet there's 15 minutes of that that needs to be on the web.
Yeah.
People need to hear 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. Like, there should be chunks of time during that service that need to be broadcast, and people's lives will be different, and God will change them because of those things. But like the whole 60 minutes, just put it on the web and let it fly. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't fit how we are wired in a lot of ways, in my opinion. And I think it's when people are like, oh, the other couple of churches, big churches, have cut their stream off, right? And don't do streaming. Well, that's fine. Guess what? They didn't cut content off.
Yeah. Right.
To the web.
Yeah.
They're still producing a podcast. They're producing content that people are engaging with on the web.
They're probably taking their sermon and putting it in the form of a podcast.
Yep. So all of that stuff is a technology methodology, right? We're using technology to get stuff out there, but being not live at 9 a.m. on YouTube is like a way to do it, but there's a million different ways to do it. And I would argue, like, let's define that. And then it defines like, oh, we need better cameras. Maybe we need better lighting. Yeah. Let's capture it. Let's record the ISOs. Let's ship it off to an editor for $1,000. Yeah. They do a quick edit of it, put it on YouTube, and here's this really great 20 minutes of content. Yeah. You know, so that's my like soapbox of like, let's get to the place where we're serving and producing quality content, not quality content. Like, it's the greatest message ever told, right? Yeah. And so why not be really intentional with the way and this whole idea of authenticity and all that stuff, and I just don't know if people are just turning this. I don't know. I'm not watching at 9 a.m. and just going to sing in my living room. I'm just not. But man, I am when I'm in an in-room experience, I'm all in. Yeah, you know, singing and all the stuff. Yep. So,
I think that's the key too. Is what's the goal of your audience, right? Is it to show? Is it to preview your church? Right. So that people that new to the area, they want to find a church, they can get a snippet. Is it for people that are regular attenders that are not there that weekend? Yeah. Is it,
I'm not previewing, is it for people previewing your church for a weekly live stream. Just post one of your best ones and be done with it.
And honestly, exactly. if that's how people are finding their way into the church primarily, we should maybe question some things as well too.
Right. Yeah. Right? I would argue that a better way a more compelling way for people to preview your church is to actually have a church full of disciples who are sharing about their church in their workplace and in their soccer games, in their community, at the coffee shop. Because I'm with you, Jeremy. I think, for Shady Grove Baptist in the middle of nowhere.
That's probably a real place, by the way.
There's probably a lot of Shady Grove Baptists, but Shady Grove Baptist
I love that name, though.
It's my shorthand for the
T-shirt.
And I always go, man, there's a Shady Grove out there that just thinks Jeff.
There's probably
Jeff
a Shady
has
Grove
their
that
number.
subscribes.
Yeah,
to
100%.
We should do an MxU shirt line.
Yeah.
Shady
Okay,
Shady
sorry
Grove.
for the Shady Grove. Shady Grove River of Life Crossroads Community Church of God in Christ. How about that?
Yeah.
With the softball team.
With a softball team.
That's right.
For them to think that they're locked off, wide shot GoPro with a mono bad mix, comes straight off their M32, is going to be compelling in any way to bring people in the door is silly. Let's just be honest. I mean, I think so why not make the in-room experience compelling and focus on that local community? Like, why do I want to try to be something for the outside world when I'm having a hard enough time getting it right for the people in the room?
Yeah. That's really good. I mean, and for you listeners, keep in mind, we are production people. So like we love technology. And we love to find excuses to implement technology at times, but we have to be really honest about what are we trying to do?
Yeah. And to your point, why not take those resources and distill it down into what's the most compelling story we can tell in 10 minutes? And put it on the website, put it on Instagram, put it on whatever that is, this is what makes our experience of the gospel undeniable. And leave it at that. Like, whether it's a life change story, a baptism, somebody who's been rescued from addiction, whatever it is, it's like, let's maybe tell that story. But maybe that happens most effectively in the room too. I don't know. But like what you said earlier in the podcast about like, what is the purpose of this screen? What is the purpose of, what we're sending out? I think that conversation among leadership and production staff has to be strategic and happening often.
Well, it was happening, 2017, really up until 2019, 2020. It was happening. Mega churches were figuring. There's some folks are figuring it out. 2020 happened, and then it was basically like, boom,
Everybody's in.
Everybody has to be in. But and now it's like, okay, let's pause, let's redefine, let's figure this out. And yes, we love production, but at the end of the day, it's like, I think recognize the church experience is unique. That's what I mean. Like, it's unique, and we're making some incorrect assumptions if we assume people want to turn on the stream at 9 a.m. Number one. So let's help our lead team understand, like, okay, what are assumptions that we're making that are incorrect? And then, okay, I think the church has the opportunity to lead here. I think we have the opportunity to like go, hey, we can do some really cool things with our technology that other industries are going to look to us and be like, oh, that was brilliant. But we got to get there and we got to ask some questions and we got to help really shape and define that from a large scale to mega scale, right? Anybody can do it. Like, anybody can turn on YouTube and become a videographer overnight. Contrary to what the pros say, but
Jeff, you just said streaming has to be strategic, which maybe that's the title for this episode. I don't know, but I think that is the thing that we're missing. You'd be surprised at how many churches are streaming and their pastor had no idea when it started. Like the tech team was just like, now we're doing it.
Well, talk about volunteer leadership. Like, I remember in the late 90s when we were transitioning from hymns church to full band church. Like we had volunteers who were like gun ho, like rewiring the entire system during the week. They're just getting after it. And I think that still is the case. Where it's like everybody has an idea of like what needs to happen, and a lot of these churches are just doing it.
And a lot of them, the volunteers are buying the gear. And they're going, hey, it's a volunteer tech director, and he might have access to some gear somewhere and getting all of that implemented, and the pastor doesn't even really know. And so the conversations aren't happening.
Mhm.
And so,
And nobody's watching.
yeah, and it becomes almost like a hobby of sorts for a few,
Yeah.
5 or so people.
Yeah.
But it's like, man, divert your energy elsewhere
Yeah.
because it might be more impactful. I would dare say it will be more impactful from what we've seen. So how do you, I'd be curious to know from you guys, like for the people who aren't in that position, the ones who pastors telling them we got to be streaming because my buddy Tommy at Shady Grove is doing it now, and he's telling me they're seeing a ton of fruit from that. So Jeremy, we got to start doing it now. How do they navigate that conversation in a way that's honoring to their leader and the person that they're partnering in ministry with, but also ask the right questions and not be that tech guy.
Yeah.
Not be the guy that's just like, yes, sure, or cross my arms, no.
Right.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's the job of the technical person on staff or volunteer, whatever that circumstance is, the person that's been given kind of that authority to speak into those things with a very non-technical senior pastor that has a really strong opinion about, we need to do this thing. I think it is their job to very clearly communicate the need for budget and or resources. And then when they get that back, be able to communicate, okay, that's probably not enough. Like, let's just assume that that's the circumstance we're going to be in. That's probably not enough to do it really well. So here are the trade-offs. Here are the risks with reliability, and ask questions like, okay, we're going to buy this piece of budget gear. That means, I don't know, maybe one Sunday a month, we're going to have a problem with it and it might not work. It might not go up at all. We might not have a live stream. Is that acceptable for the outcome of this? Is this of the same priority as the in-room experience? Would you be okay with us just not having a service 1 week a month? Likely not, right? But
That's good.
Maybe the answer is, if the stream goes down once a month, whatever. That's fine. It's my extended family in a different state that's actually watching it. It's fine. But I really want them to watch it. So I want it to be there. And that's the amount of resources you should put into it, is because there's 25 people watching. And it's okay. That's totally different than the pressure, not only of what gear to choose, but also executing every week. We're listening to it back. We have to add these cameras because it snowballs really fast. When you start as 1 or 2 cameras and you start as a single, PA feed off the console, and then you listen back and you go, well, that doesn't sound that good, or that doesn't look that good with that one camera that's zooming in and out. Then you look at other churches online that have a lot more resources and like, oh, well, next budget year, let's get one more camera. Let's get one more. Now let's get a bigger video switcher. And now suddenly you have a full-blown video system and there's still only 100 people watching, on a weekend. And maybe you're not even posting it after the fact, so nobody's watching it during the week. It's careful, be very careful with the snowball, because it is fun, right? Technical people, we enjoy the toys and the buttons and we can do this cool thing. And that's not inherently bad, but you have to be really careful the road you go down and really have that conversation. What's the goal? Who's the audience? What's the goal? And that will define how much resource we really put towards this. And I think what Bagwell was saying is so true about live. I mean, the church I'm at has a very well-known pastor who is being broadcast everywhere a lot. Even in that circumstance, we're in the tens of thousands live on a Sunday, but they're watching a portion of the content. They don't watch 100% generally. And that's way less, many, many, many times less than people that watch it during the week via clips on, Instagram or wherever, or watch the video podcast that gets put up every week, or listen to the audio version of the podcast that get put up. I mean, it's nowhere even remotely close in numbers of true live. We will continue doing true live, I'm sure, but if we were to take that out, those numbers would remain the same. Like the people that are engaging with the content in post-produced clips, that are minutes, not an hour, they're 7, 15-minute versions of parts of things that are said. And that's just seems to be the way that especially in America, society is moving towards consuming media like that. Now you can make an argument that that's not a good thing. That's a different discussion altogether.
Yeah.
But if the goal is to get some of the content out of what your communicator is saying, that's the way people are engaging with it now.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily watching a predetermined, this is the time that we live stream. Now, there are some people that are doing that. There are some people that maybe have home churches and they're watching that stream as their sermon content. And so they do want it at a scheduled time. So it can be both and, for sure. But asking those questions, is that what we're supporting? Like, do we know those people exist out around the world that are maybe watching this at this specific time? Then that's a different conversation, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think culturally, there used to be a habit of appointment TV.
Yeah.
In other words,
Yeah.
very few people in the 80s would miss must-see TV on Thursday night on NBC.
Yeah.
Because that was the only time you could see The Cosby Show, Different World, Cheers, and Night Court, and then into the 10 p.m. drama. Like, that was what people did in this culture 30, 40 years ago.
That sounds sweet.
It was awesome.
That sounds
We should go back.
But now it's like I can stream anything, anywhere, anytime. So why would I set an appointment to be on my browser at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning?
Yeah.
It's like, if it's compelling, I want to be there in person.
Yeah. Even like Netflix that, and these different groups that will do the releases once a week, I don't know when they release that during the week.
Right.
I just know that next week sometime.
Next week I get a new one.
Right.
Yeah.
And and I'm sure they do release it at a time, and they probably publish that somewhere and I'm just unaware of it.
Yeah.
But even, you could think of churches in the same boat. Like, you're producing content every week. I know that next week sometime I will watch it.
Yeah.
I don't know when necessarily, but
Yeah.
Here's a topic that, back to the original conversation. Hey, we need to stream. And I think what we find ourselves in is like the technical person. It's a really, really, really tricky situation because, particularly in the evangelical church, because most pastors having this, conversation with you about streaming comes about it from a evangelist mindset. So think about like his or her calling is to move somebody from a place of death to life, have Jesus, right? But the message that they're carrying and the calling that they're carrying is to go and tell the world and make disciples. And like, no,
that the world may
the
know.
message
Yeah.
is the most important. So it's the same conversation of like, hey, we want a mega church conversation is like, we want a jib in the room. Well, that's going to take 20 seats. Production people are like, screw those 20, get them out of here. Pastor's like, no, that's 20 souls.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, what? And so it's like, that is an impossible conversation to have, to be honest. It's like when we walk into the conversation, it's like, okay, well, you want to stream. Just know most of the time pastor's heart is like, I want to stream because more people need to know about Jesus. Yeah. That's why they're streaming.
It's well-intentioned.
It's well-intentioned.
Most of the time, right?
And so if you just, as a tech leader, you have to go into it knowing that. You have, and I don't feel like I fully embraced it. I didn't have that. I didn't think about it as intentionally as I would now. It's like, oh, they're coming about it from an evangelist mindset is like, well, even if one person watched a crappy stream and their lives are changed, then that's good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, crap. Yes, that is true. Like, okay, so how do we support that? Like, okay, is that the way we're going to do? Is that the mentality, right? That's the intention. That's what we want to do. And then, so just be careful and understand, like, when we have these, and again, church is unique. Name me another industry in the world that has that type of product conversation where marginal is very, very, very okay product. Like, I don't think there's any other place. And that's why it's really complicated conversation to have, because it's like high professional and high spiritual all at the same time.
Yeah. And it could be dishonoring at times too.
It could
be. And
yes.
that's the thing, like for production folks, if you're having a hard time grasping why does this matter? Why are we doing it? Like, it might be because maybe you need to revisit how passionate you are about discipling others, right? And I think sometimes we get so caught up in like the megaphone effect, right? Well, let's which Jesus didn't do a whole lot of, right? And that's a whole other episode. But all that to say, like, man, we need to, there was a young gal at our pop-up in DC, and we were having this conversation, and you guys will remember, she got up and she was like, yeah, our leadership is talking about not doing this anymore because we recognize that like our job is to be disciple makers. Like our job is to care for the flock. But like when stuff is going out onto the World Wide Web, like how do we know how can we disciple those people? How can we shepherd them? And so, which is a valid question to ask, like what role does this play? And it goes back to what you said very early on, like what is the purpose of this screen that we are putting so much time and energy into? And sometimes in some churches, they're putting more energy into that than what's happening in the room, especially in the very large churches.
But it could be great.
Right?
It could be. Like,
it could be.
I'm just saying it's
there is no blanket like black and white here.
It's not. And that's why I just think it's an expression of the church is like, there's so many different ways that we can do this. Let's just be very intentional. But then if we drill it all down to this like very, very, very micro level of like tech director, lead pastor conversation, just understand like, it's not, for me to say I can't support that is not a representation. This is where I would push back a little bit with you. For me to say I can't support that technically is not my lack of wanting to disciple other people. And it's not my lack of calling and commitment.
Yeah.
And I think what pastors sometimes have a tendency, either the pastors do or the tech person will put it on themselves, is to then put that on as like, well, I need to be a better person, or I need to just read my Bible more, or there's something about me. How dare I want like to not support that in that way? Like, no. That just means your wiring and giftedness is great. Like you're wanting to be professional in this thing. It's not that you aren't as committed to the craft and calling.
Yeah.
It is just that the way you see it and the way your pastor may see it is very different.
Yeah.
And there's a conversation there. But like, and the pastor can't also be like, well, you're not as committed to the one, that could be out there. And that's why it's a very, very tricky conversation to be had.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that Jesus saves people. You don't.
Right. Correct.
Like, sorry.
Yeah.
It's good to.
I love that.
It is good to be excellent at
Yes.
it.
I think we've all
100%.
tried. It's
Yes.
just been a
But
big
like-
fail. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
When you put that amount of responsibility of like, well, if this stream doesn't go up, somebody's going to hell.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
like, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's take
Yeah.
a step back.
Exactly.
Right? Jesus saves people, you don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
If that stream doesn't go up, it did not affect that person's eternity, you know, and that's okay. And, I think sometimes some senior pastors will lean that direction.
Yep.
And it's like, hold on, let's have a step back here.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't want to evangelize. It's not that we don't want to disciple well. And maybe the stream is part of that process with people that are remote, whatever the situation is. That's fine.
No, that's
But let's remember that why we're here.
Yeah.
Like nothing you're doing is solving a problem for
Yeah.
eternity, right? Like Jesus is going to do what he's going to do. And that's the way it is.
Man, we need a senior pastor on here talking about this.
Yeah, we do.
That
We
would be
do,
very
yeah.
helpful.
Because I would say to that senior pastor, you care so much about getting the stream out there, but your comms team can't even get people to click on your website.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's like somehow it's all about the stream, and it's about engagement, whether that's in person, whether it's on the web, whether it's via a live stream. It's like, are you creating a compelling experience of the gospel that is going to be engaging enough for people to actually take a step in their faith? And I think if that happens best in the room, let's focus most of our energy on the room.
Yeah.
There are some churches though where it does happen really compelling and effective online.
And it usually is because they did it so well in person that what they're doing is an extension of their faith community, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes we try to achieve something in this other realm when we haven't figured it out face to face.
Well, and for me, I mean, I'm always going to default to, the whole point is being in community.
Yeah.
The whole point is experiencing the body of Christ together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So to add layers of distance in that
Mm-hmm.
until you have this
Yeah.
in-person thing figured out is, to me, an exercise in futility. But
It's a gathering of content. So like I have deep, rich community with people that I watch shows with who I never see face to face. And so we always relationally gather around content, shared similar content.
okay, but you said earlier you're not going to engage at 9 a.m. on a Sunday
Correct.
singing to your TV.
That's
But
exactly
in the room, you're going for it.
correct.
So,
So that's a gathering around content. That's why it's a both and conversation. It's not one or. That's why. So like there's content that we can create as a church that people gather around and people have conversations around and engage with that's not a face-to-face on a Sunday morning experience.
But I think what
But it's
Jeff is
both
saying.
and.
But I think what Jeff is saying is that can't be the meat and potatoes.
It could be.
Yeah, but I think we would all. I think we would all agree that like the richness of gathering and praying with one another in person, breaking bread, taking communion together in person, worshiping God in person together as a faith community is a rich experience that maybe shouldn't be replaced.
It's
I'm
not saying to replace.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, and I
that's why
think
I say
so I
both
think
and.
that's what I'm saying. Is I think we
we're not,
agree.
we're not setting out to create a false dichotomy. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not either or.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying that
Yeah.
for a church who's struggling,
Yeah.
it might be better to focus your energy on what's
Yes.
happening for the people who are there together in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say this whole conversation if you've stuck around and listened this far, awesome. And I just want to make sure, like, don't hear us like beating up the church industry, pastors, anything. I just think the church is positioned to do something incredible in the next 20, 30, 50 years with technology. And I think it's cool that we get to live in this time where we get to lead in this.
Yeah.
And it's just way complicated.
Yeah.
And like it requires these conversations to move the ball forward.
Yeah.
And who knows what it'll end up being. I mean, gosh, I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old, and I'm like, what church are they taking their kids to?
Mm-hmm.
It's wild to think about what technology would be anyway.
It'll be a different one. I bet that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Very good.
Well, this has been really fun.
Yeah, this has been really good. We knew we knew this would go this way, I think.
I was wondering, okay. The mega.
Special thanks to the Lammoris for
Oh,
joining
yeah,
us.
the Lammoris.
And the
Yeah.
Bagwells.
Yeah, the Lammoris and the
We got
Bagwells. This
both
is going to be
Jeremys.
great.
Yeah.
This is so
Always.
good.
It's always
It's always
awesome
a good
to hang
time
out
with you guys. And
Yeah.
I know it was a long ways for you to come out, Lommori, but Bagwell, no excuses. You need to come up more.
Yeah, it's
And,
true.
We'll give you a microphone.
Yeah, and for those of you listening and watching, we still have a few pop-ups left this year. We've talked about pop-ups a little bit today. So go to the website, getmxu.com, and get your tickets. By the time this airs, we've probably got 3 more pop-ups remaining, and we can't wait to see you in person because we actually think that when our community gathers in person, I don't care what Jeremy says, when we gather in person, really exciting and engaging things happen because we want to be in community with this community.
Yeah.
And so, we're being strategic about doing that in person this year. So Dallas, Fort Lauderdale, Seattle, we're still coming for you. Can't wait to see you in person.
Yeah, it's good. We'll see you guys next time.